Welcome to Concerning the Spiritual in Art, a podcast exploring spirituality, consciousness, and the creative process. I'm your host, Martin Benson. All right, y'all. Welcome back to the podcast. I have a magnificent episode for you today with visual artist David Onri Anderson. And man, we just hit it off from the get-go. It's just super in alignment. He's an incredible artist based in Nashville, Tennessee. He does these amazingly powerful, whimsical, magical, transcendental paintings that are so unique, such a breath of fresh air when you look at them. They're so surprising and exciting in the way they use his color, the way he expresses form, the imagery that he utilizes. It's just really powerful. He forages for his own dyes from the natural world, using flowers and things from his garden to build and create his own dyes and use his own materials on his painting. He's just very involved in every aspect of the process, from the materials to the final moment of creation when the whole work comes together. We talked a lot about his influences in spirituality and sort of how that began for him, looking back at his sort of family lineage and his personal history from his family coming from Europe over to the States, and how that kind of influenced his sort of spiritual sort of framework for his life. We talked about his explorations and looking not only from his Jewish sort of background and the mysticism surrounding the Jewish tradition, but also his adventures and explorations into the Eastern traditions, into the Buddhist and Tantric traditions of India. And then sort of talking about how that all sort of came together as he started focusing on the natural world more, and how he's kind of integrated all these sort of spiritual perspectives into his own unique expression. We had an incredible conversation about the role of spirituality and art, the role of art and culture, how we can sort of create new paradigms of sort of the commerce or the economies that surround art making, the commercialization of it, and how the limitations of that might be leading us sort of in a wrong direction, and how we can maybe develop a whole new paradigm for artists to exist in the 21st century, where they can sustain themselves and explore their spirituality in the most authentic ways. It was just such a beautiful exchange. Him and I are just very much in alignment on a lot of things. And I think y'all are going to just enjoy this conversation so much and get so much from it. I know I did. And you're also going to just love seeing his work. I mean, it's just incredible. So enjoy this podcast with David Onri Anderson. Hey, y'all, I'm going to cut in here real quick for all my YouTube viewers out there, just to remind you that the podcast also exists on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and any major podcast platform. So if you're enjoying what you're seeing here on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe on one of those platforms as well, so you can take the show with you on the go and never really miss an episode. Also, I wanted to let you know that I'm now offering subscriptions on my Instagram page at Martin L. Benson for 99 cents a month. That's less than $12 a year, which that funding will go toward helping produce the show. So I can continue to evolve the podcast, continue to create great content. So if you support what I'm doing here and are enjoying all this content here on YouTube, consider not only subscribing on the podcast platforms, but also subscribing on Instagram for that 99 cents a month, so that I can continue on this path. So thank you all. Now back to the show. Peace. All right, David, welcome to the podcast. Good morning, dude. How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me, Martin. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. I'm super stoked to connect with you. We were talking a little bit off record just about the first time I came across your work was at an exhibition at Good Children Gallery, which is an art collective in New Orleans, in kind of the Bywater area. And I immediately was just so blown away by the work in that show. And I'm excited to be here with you today to explore a lot of the ideas that surround your process. I'm really interested in sort of the ways in which you think about your art making in relation to spirituality or mysticism, because I know that's a big part of, influences in your work. And I think a good place for us to maybe begin our discussion today would be around the origins of your spiritual interest and your interest in mysticism, and how that sort of interest found its way into your creative process. Where did that begin for you?
So it's kind of like my life and my origins and roots kind of like started the spirituality before I was even born. Like my great grandfather, his name is Moshe or Moses, and he was born in Algeria, and he was a rabbi,
Oh,
and he
wow.
was like a rabbi to like, well, he was like a minister to both like Jews and the Muslims in Algeria, and he was just like loved people,
Mm.
and he had a vow of poverty, so him and his family were poor, but they were constantly like taking people in their homes and helping people even though they didn't have much.
Oh, wow.
So I kind of like came from, so my grandfather, his name is Henri. He was born in Algeria, and then he had to move to France because of all the shit that happened in Algeria.
Hmm.
And then my mom was born in Paris, and then my mom wanted to be an artist, so she moved to America and went to school in Florida. And there, my dad and mom met in art school, and then my dad got a job in Nashville, and then so our whole family lives in Nashville. Like
Oh,
all of
wow.
us are in Nashville.
So funny how that happens, huh?
None of us know what's going on, but we all live here for some reason. So my mom is like very spiritual and very like animated
Hmm.
and very creative, and my dad is like very kind of like quiet and practical, but also very creative and also really goofy. So like they're these two weirdos that love each other, and my mom is like coming from this kind of like very Jewish background, like rabbi, like her grandfather was a rabbi,
Yeah.
but like not so like her dad was not Orthodox at all. He did not. He left school. He left the church. He left the military. He like ran away from everything and
Wow.
became a hairdresser in Paris.
Oh my gosh.
So like our family, like we like to do our own thing. We kind of like usually drop out of school and start our own jobs and stuff.
Yeah.
That's kind of been what everyone in my family does, is just kind of like do their own thing. So there's like this spiritual like base to what everyone does in our family. Like everyone is spiritual,
Wow.
but like no one is kind of like playing by the rules in a way, or like they're still kind of going off the book. So I was kind of like raised kind of like messianic Jew. Like my mom believed in Christ and
Hmm.
also Jewish. So like we celebrated all the holidays basically.
Wow.
And I was like really into it. But then when I sort of left the house when I was 18, I sort of got more into Buddhism and into
Mm.
tantric, Indian tantric, or like I found out that like Buddha's from India, so I wanted to study India more than Japan. So I just like studied basically after a while like my own, like I was noticing there's so many other ways that like religion and spirituality make people just good, like good at life. So I'm like, I think that's valid. Like I don't think anyone's like particular belief is more valid than another. So
Yeah.
when I left the house, I wanted to just like take that in more because I felt like my family, like they had their thing and I loved it, but like I wanted to know more about other people that I've met and like,
Yeah.
you know, like how that works for them too. And like some of the art that would come from those ancient traditions were so beautiful and they look so
Mm.
contemporary, like some of that ancient Tibetan stuff,
Yeah.
like stuff happening today. And so, and I'm also really influenced by Russian Catholic icon paintings, which
Cool.
whole other thing. But,
Yeah.
so in my opinion, the best art as well as the best music is spiritual, like comes from a
Hmm.
spiritual kind of place.
Yeah.
I normally don't like stuff as much as like about like just feelings, because like feelings are important and they're good, but like they change, you know, they change all the
Yeah.
time. And so I kind of want to make stuff that like, you know, involves my feelings and myself, but like then goes beyond this temporary feeling I have and sort of like hopefully crystallize into something that contains more feelings than I've had, or like can be something I aspire to. So basically my spirituality is kind of like this like self-written, like I'm really influenced by William Blake, like writing your own
Yeah.
Bible,
Mm.
making your own hymns, like combining heaven and hell to find out like what is going on, you know, what the whole of
Yeah.
it is, you know.
Yeah, dude.
So so all my art is basically a way for me to keep track of those kind of thoughts and
Yeah.
those kinds of like inspirations, because it doesn't happen like every day and it doesn't happen very quickly, but like every now and then it's like focus on the sun, like the actual sun. And so like I will think about like the sun in the sky, but also all the mythologies about the sun and all the like
Hmm.
all the deities that have ever existed about the sun, and then all the ways that like Christ is the sun, or like that
Hmm.
Buddha is the sun, or that we are the sun, or that like all the people that have ever died that want to help humanity apparently go to the sun and then emit back onto the cosmos. And
Yeah.
there's just so many ways to think about life and death. And I just like, I also like to root it in nature, I guess, because
Yeah.
I grew up in the garden and in Tennessee. Like my dad was a gardener and we'd always go hiking. So I always felt like if you really want to like know what God's saying, just like look at nature. Like
Yeah,
all written in nature.
definitely.
Like people like to read holy books and stuff, but my problem with holy books is you have to interpret them. Like everyone's
Hmm.
interpreting what they mean, and it's
Yep.
all cultural. So it's like me, I feel really culturally just like splayed all over the place.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, I just want to read nature, like read the universe,
Yeah,
and that I feel like that's a universal thing, because it's
definitely.
we can all look at the sun and interpret that. So
Definitely. Dude,
I
that's so fascinating. Like the way that you're speaking about, like how your spirituality began even before you were born, because like the origins of like your parents' spirituality and their story is a part of yours. But I think what you're pointing to about like finding your own path, like when you were 18 and you started to kind of explore more of like the Eastern, like tantric traditions of India and Buddhism and kind of forging your own path. I think that really is kind of, for me, an indicator of the times we live in. Like, think about how much access we have, David, to like so much information about mysticism and mystical traditions across the globe that if we were born like even like 50 years ago or 100 years ago, 200 years ago, we might not have any access to any of that. So we live in a really interesting time where I think we are called to kind of try to integrate all these things into sort of a new form of mythology of this contemporary landscape. And I think your art making is a way of sort of almost crafting out that sort of new mythology by
yeah,
pulling together all of these sort of elements that have been a part of your spiritual makeup for your life and finding this sort of unique expression. And I definitely see that a lot in the way that you explore imagery in your work. I love how you talked about how your work is kind of like a marking of like the thoughts that you're having and the contemplations you're having. And I wonder if we can like dig more into that, like looking at this painting behind you. Can you maybe like speak a little bit about like this piece in particular and like maybe some of the thoughts or like the things you're contemplating that kind of created your ideas for this particular piece?
yeah. So um, this one also kind of marks like some of the last. It's like kind of the end of a chapter.
Hmm.
Um, so like in 2020, I started making maybe the figurative stuff that you've seen from me that you
Yeah.
saw.
Hmm.
So that didn't start till like 2020, and then before that, I basically never did anything figurative. Like I didn't
Mm.
know how to do that or why I would do that. So this painting behind me, I was on a quest basically in 2018, 2019 to just like it was the first time I was basically offered to be a full-time artist. Like I was working with this gallery in Los Angeles and they were paying for like shipping and everything. So I could make
Wow. That's
as big paintings as I want and they would ship them and then they would fly me out and it was all like, what? The gallery actually went under in 2020, so it's all different now for me. Um,
yeah.
but so I made this painting basically like I was meditating on like the concept of a candle for a long time. Like the candle has been part of my motif since like maybe 2017 or something.
Yeah.
And this painting got finished in 2019. So for several years, especially when it was like winter, like when it was dark and cold, that's when the idea of the candle like became more something I would like to focus on. And then I started like wanting to think about like the idea of like when you're alive you're this body but you're sort of like in my mind like you're this wax candle and you have a wick but when you're lit you're on like you're alive
Yeah.
spiritually on but then you're also immediately dying like you're melting like, so it's like as soon as it's on it's over in a way or like it's starting
Yes.
so there's like something kind of exciting to me about a candle that's lit because then it's like it's on but it's like the drama is starting now like now
Exactly. Yeah.
end when it could have been there forever, but now it's going to end.
Yeah.
So, like there's this weird like tension with a figure and a candle and like the idea of being alive or being spiritual and
Yeah.
being vulnerable.
Definitely.
And then so also I guess something important to talk about is when I was 16, I had like a near death experience in the
Mm.
ocean.
Oh,
And
wow.
that's when I started painting. Like after that like day, I was like, I need to like live each day like really intentionally because you could actually die. Like I
Yeah.
didn't realize, I
Death is
didn't
a
realize
real thing.
yeah, I didn't realize you could die randomly. Like no one would give a shit. Like you'd just die.
Yeah.
So like, we were out in the ocean, and like it was me and my brothers and my dad, and we all almost died. Like I blacked
Wow.
out in the ocean, and just like a wave washed me back up.
Oh my God. What happened? Did you get caught in like a riptide
It
or?
was riptide, yeah. And we're just playing, And we didn't realize, like, after a while we couldn't touch the bottom and couldn't swim back. And my dad just started screaming. I was like, oh my God, my dad is freaking out. And so I was like trying to swim back, and then I couldn't. And then I just like my body gave out, and I was like, I guess I'm just going to die.
God, dude,
And
that's
so, like,
crazy.
yeah. So after that, I was like, life is like really precious. And like at any random day, it could be it.
Yes.
So in my studio now, I just like, I'm on like, this could be it.
Yeah, man. Wait, can we go back to that story real quick? Like, what happened? Like, did someone rescue you? Like, how did you all, you just got spat out of the rip current and
Yeah, I literally was like, all right. Like, I thought I would say something kind of epic to God before I died, but I was like, I guess this is it. That's all I said.
oh my God.
And then I sort of blacked out, and then I just like could feel myself sinking into the water and just darkness. And then next thing I know, a huge wave just smashes my face like into the sand. And then like I just feel like all the sand like tearing into my face. And then I try to stand up, and I finally can stand up in the water. And I'm like, oh, I guess I'm good. And then I'm on the shore. And then like next thing I know, this lifeguard's like, there's a bunch of people out there. And I was like, that was us, dude.
Oh my God.
And we were all right.
That's a miracle though, dude. You know, that rip currents are no joke, you know, like especially if you don't know how to like respond to it or if it catches you off guard.
Yeah.
Man, that's crazy. I mean, that moment though, like where you're actually like, you know, death in that moment, like death is no longer like a concept. It is a visceral, real thing that is confronting you. And that
Yeah.
is a totally different experience than just contemplating death in like an abstract way, like to actually like be face to face with it. And I think I feel a parallel in my own spiritual journey, my own creative journey. It was for me like I had a kind of a near death experience too that sort of catalyzed my whole creative journey as well, kind of the similar sort of insights. Mine wasn't like a mine was more of like a longer illness that I was going through, but it was still the same process of like in a visceral way confronting the reality of the, you know, of the temporal body, that like we are subject to decay and death no matter what we may think. And I love the idea of the candle as like kind of a metaphor for this. It's like it makes you think, it's like once like life is, death is, like they go hand in hand, like they
Yeah.
are not separate components. Life and death are like one whole unit, one whole thing. And so when you can acknowledge that and embrace death as like an integral part of reality, I think it softens it a little bit. I think ultimately none of us will ever know how we're going to react to death until we're confronted by it. You know, we can prepare as much as we want, but we don't know until those moments. And actually, a lot of these spiritual traditions, especially if we think about like some of the tantric traditions, especially in Buddhism, you know, from certain vantage points, a lot of it is really just about preparing for the moment of death. It's like
Yeah.
that's what all the meditative practices are really about. All the prayer, all the mantra, all the yogic, you know, exercises, contemplative exercises. It's all really about preparing you for the moment of death. Because I guess from those traditions, their point of view is like that moment of death is really the most important moment of all your life, because the level and layers of consciousness that are being revealed at that moment will determine where you go. And
Yeah.
so like the bardo is something you're constantly preparing for. The bardo is the Tibetan term for like the in-between realm between life and death. And so I think that's such a beautiful thing though, that you could be kind of initiated into that at such a young age. I think a
Yeah.
lot of people go a long time in their life without ever having any sort of thoughts about their own demise, about what happens beyond death. They kind of just block it out and are numb to it until they're like something happens to them later in life. But I think if you can confront that early on, it just sets the stage for such a different sort of signature of consciousness that you're going to bring to your life.
Yeah.
That's how I felt for me too. So I'm totally like in resonance there.
It's funny though, because you would never like choose that though too. Like
Right?
you never choose that death initiation, but it's like
Yeah.
it really gives you a perspective on what actual life is though. It's
Hmm.
like it's very important, but like it's fucking terrifying. So you don't really want that to happen to anybody.
Exactly, dude. Exactly. It's like I look back at that those moments in my life when I was in, you know, and my body was literally falling apart on me, and I didn't know, and I almost died from everything. Like I look at back at those like the best thing that ever happened to me. But in the moment, I was terrified. I was, you know, I was confused. I was just so like unequipped with handling it. But that's what, because I made through it, that's what caused me to kind of like shift my whole interest into figuring out what's going on here. There's so much more going on this planet. There's so much more going on with me in relation to living. I want to figure it out. And I just started diving deep into all of it. And then it, brings me back into like my own sense of my Jewish identity and the mystical traditions of Judaism. And then seeing the parallels of some of those teachings with the teachings of sort of the Buddhist or even the Vedic traditions, and like starting to see this sort of like underpinning universal framework of reality that has a lot of relationships, so they're not as different as we think on the surface. Did you
Yeah.
kind of start to discover that too, like as you started exploring different traditions, like how,
Yeah.
yes, they're like their expressions, like cultural expressions, iconography, rituals may be different like on the surface, but like the underpinning like consciousness that goes into them is very much aligned.
Yeah. That's the part where I thought almost like, isn't that obvious to everyone at this point that like they're all talking about like love or like enlightenment? Like they're all pointing to like basically they want to know the truth and they want to
Yeah.
be good. And it's just like it's really weird, I guess, for there to be wars and hatred and discrimination against cultures. It's just like we all just want to live a good life. And all
Yeah.
these books are about how to do that,
Yeah.
metaphysically and physically and all these other ways. And so like I just kind of got disappointed, I guess, by living in Tennessee, by like how like there's some Christians or there's some religious people that just don't know how to listen to other people or don't know how to respect
Mhm.
other people's truths.
Yeah.
And so like I kind of at some point decided not to like take on a label of any spirituality and just be spiritual and just like talk about truth. And
Yeah.
if that resonates, then it resonates. And
Ex-
that's my way of like trying to tear down boundaries, just trying to make things resonate with more people that might not think that they could agree with each other or something.
I know. I mean, fundamentalism is really can be very scary
Yeah.
because it's another form of entrapment. It's another form of a box that you put your consciousness in, and the limitation that you're giving yourself in terms of your windows to the world, to reality, to actual reality.
Yeah.
And so I think art though is kind of like the best, in my opinion. It's like one of the best tools that we have to break down those walls and get into that universality of like our collective relationship with each other, our interdependent nature with
Yeah.
one another that goes beyond like these sort of signifiers of culture and religiosity and of our shared histories. And
Hmm.
so I think finding like a way of using imagery and process and intention through the creative act is like an incredible way to like pierce the veil, and
Hmm.
invite other people to find like these new pathways into this universal consciousness.
Yeah.
And I think your own like kind of unique expression of how you do it, it's so fresh, man. Like I just love like the color palettes that I see from you. I love the way that you like are playful with your imagery. There's kind of like a whimsical, joyful energy that I think comes from a lot of your work. And I really also appreciate like the process of like foraging, for your own dyes and pigments, and like trying to be a little bit more intentional about the kind of materials you use. Was that something that was always a part of your art process? Or like when did like because as you were speaking earlier about like how you like look into the natural world is like really that's the best teacher we have. You know what
Hmm.
I mean? Like is the natural world, because it's like the thumbprint of the creator or the creative principles of reality are all revealed there to us if
Hmm.
we can pay attention enough, if we can slow our minds down enough to truly notice.
Yeah.
When did that start to become like a part of like your actual creative process?
That's a good question. So like I went to art school in Nashville from 2011 to 2016, and that school is gone now. They got absorbed, and they're just like this
Mm,
small independent college. But in that school, I basically I went to art school because I had a good scholarship and I knew nothing about art. So I was like, all I like is like Howard Finster and Mose Tolliver. So I was like, I should go learn about art or something. So because I could, I went, and then there I like learned like about the Chauvet cave paintings in France in art history, which are some of my favorite paintings ever.
wow.
And
Amazing.
and then Joseph Beuys really like stood out to me, and like just to see him in a museum, like vitrines full of eggshells and like fat. I'm like, how is this possible? So like I started realizing that like art is not just like art materials. It's about like, it's kind of about like making things that really represent like your story or who you are. So like the more I started realizing that about art, like or at least the art I liked, the more I started thinking like, well, if I live in Tennessee, like I got to do something kind of Tennessee about it, like about what I'm doing. So like, and so I've always gardened, like in every property I lived, like even on rental properties, I start a garden. And so like every time I have a garden, there's always flowers coming off the like the vegetables or just flowers. And so, and then reading Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer like really inspired me.
Yeah.
So there's just like, I really like to listen to like indigenous practices of how they make art, and also medieval practices, like how they would make art. And
Yeah.
all that always is like natural and organic because that's what they had. And so like, I'd say probably like 2016 or 17, I started, or maybe actually before that, actually like more like 2015, I just started like getting really experimental, like with just like whatever is around me, like sometimes natural, sometimes unnatural. Like I put it in the painting, and
Yeah.
it's, you know, like sometimes it'd be on the front or sometimes it'd be painted over, but it would just like start to give like a life to the painting that is not just art materials, but it's just like
Yeah.
my life, like
Yeah.
something I ate, or like, so I started to feel more personal and more specific. And then I live in the house I'm in now for almost 7 years, and there's like a walnut tree next to my studio where I get walnut ink from, and then there's like all these flowers that grow around me, like irises and violets and just hibiscus and rose.
Wow.
And so I just kind of like, every time they start to wilt, they're just such a nice color. I just like put them in the freezer and just save them, and then later on make dyes out of them.
Wow.
I've been doing that for I guess like 6 or 7 years, and it's just kind of become this like way of getting like this color and this like ephemeral nature and this almost chaotic element to happen in these super controlled paintings that just sort of like completes it. Like it doesn't feel
Yeah.
like, I don't want to be too controlling or too understanding of what I'm doing. So I have to have these other elements that are like, they're kind of based on seasons, and they're based on like time, and they're based on a place. And I can't control them. Like I have to wait for the flowers.
Yeah.
I don't make flowers. Like so like I like for there to be a part of it that's not me. That's like, that's part of like everything, you know?
Yeah, man. I mean, I think that's so beautiful, and it's something I personally have always wanted to try to like explore more of and do more of, because like I don't really understand. I guess I could Google it and find YouTube videos on how to like, make dyes out of flower petals or out of natural materials and stuff. It's something I definitely want to try to like explore more for the reasons that you're pointing to, like not only because of like the organic quality and like the relationship to a sense of place, the actual energy of like the plant itself being a part of your creative endeavor, but also like just by engaging in that part of the process, like the painting is begun before a mark has even been made, in terms of like making those materials and setting that up. I just think there's something so beautiful about that. And I think in this, something also like in relation to the contemporary world we live in, like the more, the technology, the digital sort of experiences of life we have, I feel like the more we dive deeper into this AI future, the
Mm-hmm.
more I feel like we need to dive back into the natural and
Sure.
back into the sort of like the presence of like everyday reality outside of technology to counterbalance it. Because I think, I'm not a Luddite. Like I like technology. I think it has a purpose, and I think
Mm-hmm.
it can be really useful for us. But like anything, it's got a yin and a yang, it's got a shadow and it's got a light to it. And so I find that getting back to these sort of natural processes or back to these more analog processes is a way to kind of like counterbalance this hyper digital age. Do you ever think about it like that?
Yeah, I think it's like, for me, it's like it comforts my soul to know I can still touch dirt and plants and paint with
Yes,
my
me
hands.
too, man.
I was almost like, listening to you talk, I was like almost thinking like, if everyone was like farming and playing with organic pigments, maybe I would build a computer then.
Right.
But I'm not.
Exactly.
So it's like, just because no one is doing this, like it feels like someone's got to do this, and like
Yeah.
someone's got to remind people that this is still good and this is fun, or like it's
Yeah.
not that hard, or it's like, I don't know, it's just like, I mean, I'm doing it because I'm naturally drawn to it and it makes me feel good, but like
Yeah.
there is there is a part of me that like is always kind of like countercultural, or like feels like kind of like a little like angsty about how things just like seem to be going in the wrong direction more and more
Hmm.
every year, and like I just like want to like somehow like put my stake in the ground, like don't forget
Yeah.
about this.
Yeah.
So like to me, like paintings are great because they just stay there forever. They just stay that way forever. I mean, well, the organic pigment doesn't really, but like it just like I want to have this thing that's like I was playing in the dirt.
Yes, no, man. I think it's so important. I think the painting for me is becoming more and more relevant in these times is again because of like this just the slowing down. I feel like just engaging in painting or even drawing, just any kind of analog process that involves your hands, involves a limitation of like speed. Like you can't, I mean, you can work, everyone works in their varying degrees of speed, but I think in general it slows you down a lot compared to like how quick I can, mock something up on Photoshop or Illustrator or on an iPad. Like to actually get your materials out, to actually like prepare a surface, to actually like begin the process of applying and layering and really building up that surface. Like it just is a counteractive measure toward like this our society that wants us to go, 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 go. And you know what I mean? Produce, 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 produce. Like we're like machines. And I think I don't like that feeling. I get very like anxious when I
Mhm.
feel like I have to move really, really fast, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's why I've always been drawn to, that's why I've always been drawn to the meditative process as well, because I think that goes hand in hand with my own personal creative process, because I'm constantly developing in a capacity to be hyper focused and present within the moment so that I can slow my mind down. I can slow my awareness of my sensations down so I can sense the very subtle nature of things. Because
Hmm.
I think when you move too fast, you miss the subtlety.
Yeah.
And the nuance and all of that. And so I look at your painting, I think there's so much little nuance in the way that you create. And I'm curious, like when you begin, like, because I love your drawing practice. These drawings that you do, the textures of them, they just feel so fresh. They feel so like surprising. Like I look at them and I'm always just like, huh, I didn't expect that. Like it's unexpected. And I think there's something for me that gets me very excited when I see art that like kind of like gets me off of my balance a little bit and defies an expectation. I feel like I
Yeah.
see that a lot from the kind of work you produce. Do you like when you're working, do you like do any sort of like preparatory pieces before you do like a large painting, for example, or do you just like kind of dive right in and just sort of intuitively build the composition as you start to apply the materials?
It's kind of like there's not really actually one answer for all of it, but I will say that drawing is important to me. Like drawing is part of the practice. That's
Yeah.
like the foundation. And then so like I will probably be drawing like all the time, and then sometimes like a drawing is like um, good drawing, and then sometimes the drawing is like that should be a painting, or like that feels like it's like wants to become another painting.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's several paintings and several drawings, and they're all like around the same thing. And
Yeah.
so like it kind of depends, but all the paintings end up starting out as like raw canvas and a drawing on the canvas.
Hmm.
And so the painting always like respects the drawing as much
Yeah.
as possible. And then I like so I will definitely like change and adjust things. I never really like to know everything that's happening when I'm doing it. So
Yeah.
I like to know that like it's going to be about this, but how are we going to do that? So we start with just like one general idea, and then
Yeah.
as reality comes, we like, well, this needs to happen over here, so we'll balance that out.
Yeah.
Like a thought might come to mind that doesn't feel relevant, and sometimes I'll put it in there.
Yeah.
So like I try to like incorporate basically the nature of my mind into my plans
Yeah. Yeah.
more than just my conscious mind happening and like
Yeah. You're like allowing there to be like a window for like for new inspiration to come in. Like you're not trying to like put a chokehold on the artwork, but like you have a sense of like you said, like I love how you phrased it. Like, the paintings will always like respect the drawing, but as you're working on them, you let them kind of like kind of carry on their own path in their own life. And if something intuitively flows through, you have no qualms with just applying it in that moment. And I think that's like, I think maybe what gives it such a feeling of such freshness to your work, because there is a sense of that play or that ability to maybe like abandon the initial idea a little bit in this part, because you just have this feeling or this inspiration to add this image or add this sort of pattern of color or whatever, what have you. So I think that is something really important in the creative process, is to always leave like a little window open for the universe to work with you. You know, I feel like when you try to like close it in 100% on all sides, you kind of snuff out the magic a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's hard to do because I feel like I struggle with that. And there have been certain bodies of work that I've done where I was like really doing that a lot, and then I tighten up again, and then I feel like my whole personal art practice is like an expansion and contraction, like a tightening and then a freeing, and then a
Yeah.
tightening and then a freeing. You know, I feel like it's kind of undulating in and out like that for me personally. But I always feel like I'm always reverting back to like trying to find an ability to have more freedom, you
Yeah.
know, more looseness in it. But it's hard because I have this ego or this quality in my mind that wants to control things sometimes. So I'm
Yeah.
always trying to be conscious of that.
Well, it's hard because like something that I found really impactful is like I really liked Shunryu Suzuki, like a Zen teacher, and he's
Mm-hmm.
like saying like the best way to be free is to restrain yourself. I'm like, well,
The
okay,
paradox, right?
yeah. So I'm like, well, that's where your freedom is. And then so sometimes I really think that like I want to be disciplined and I want to find that freedom from discipline. And then
Yes.
sometimes I want to find the freedom of being really stupid and like really,
Yeah.
really drunk. so
Yeah,
like
right. Yep.
so like I keep both things in mind. Like I like Rumi also, the Iranian
Mm-hmm.
mystic, and he
Yes.
has been drunk a lot. And
Yeah.
like so like I'm interested. I've been reading Rumi the most lately, and
Yeah.
so like I'm interested in just kind of like being able to be disciplined and being able to know what my boundaries are,
Yeah.
and then doing that really well, and then one day being like, forget your boundaries.
Yes, exactly. Like switch it up, right?
So like I try to, and I don't consciously do this. I have this feeling that's like, hey, forget your boundaries today, and
Yeah.
like I'm getting better and better at like listening to those voices or thinking like that's like not the right voice. Like, like I'm figuring out more and more like the wise voice to listen to and the one that's kind of a
Yeah.
trickster. And like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I listen to everyone in my head and all the things, all the people, but like I'm in a phase in my life right now. Like it's winter time, it's January. I'm in a point in my life where like things have changed a lot.
Yeah.
Like my relationships have changed, my housing situation has changed, and so I'm kind of like trying to look at everything with new eyes. And
Mm-hmm.
some things I'm looking at still make me want to keep doing it, and then other things I'm thinking like that's cool, but I don't really feel like doing that anymore.
Yeah.
Moving forward this year, I don't know what I'll make, but
Yeah.
I'm still like interested in like angelic beings, and I'm interested in the occult. But like I my like approach to making stuff is like I'm making stuff really tiny right now, like almost the size of an iPhone.
Oh, wow.
It's still taking me like a month to finish a painting.
Oh my God, dude. I
But
can't
they're
wait to
really
see those.
I like them. But like and yeah, I don't have any shows really lined up. I like left all the galleries I used to work with, and I'm just like just kind of like I've been reading the Tao Te Ching a lot, and it says
Mm,
like the more you follow the way, the more your life will shrink. And I'm
yeah.
like, I'm really feeling that right now. My life is
Yeah.
shrinking a lot.
Yeah,
It's
man.
not sad, it's not weird, it's just like it feels right that it's shrinking,
Hmm.
because now I can like focus, and like
Yeah.
even the work is shrinking and my brushes are tiny, and it's like it's weird, but it's like it feels right and it feels good.
Yeah.
So like where that will take me, I'm not sure, because like part of me feels like after I make some more tiny work, I feel like making another big painting.
Right.
And then in the meantime, I've been painting on all these bottles too, so I have all these painted bottles just
Oh
building
my
up.
God.
So I'm like, I'm maybe gonna make like a bottle pyramid or something in my front yard or something.
Sounds awesome, dude.
Yeah. So like, I have all these ideas. Do you know what Passaquan is in Georgia?
Uh-uh.
Passaquan. So that's like so Saint Eddie Owen Martin. He was this like queer psychic outsider artist who lived in Columbus, Georgia. And when his mom died, she gave him this property in Columbus, Georgia, where he built this big shrine temple, like outsider art destination called Pasquan.
Hmm.
And spirituality is just like, it's totally like he made it up. He has all these figures, all these temples, all these huge paintings,
Wow.
and so I got to have a show in there last year.
Wow.
Was it like October to December, something like that? It was like a group
Wow.
show. It was about like contemporary spirituality in the realm of like Pasaquan.
Cool.
So when I did that show, it made me realize like this is what art is for me. It's like this weird outsider, spiritual, non-commercial,
Mm.
non like sexuality, culture all over the place.
Yes.
So I was like, this is what it means to me. And so
Yeah.
after I was a part of that show and like in that world, I realized like I think that's what I want to do with my life. Like it's cool if I get like shows or whatever, but I really rather build like this kind of place that people can come to and just see the whole thing, like an immersive
Yeah.
temple or an immersive thing.
Yeah,
So
man.
kind of in the back of my head now, like that's kind of what I want to do with my life and my art is like sort of not really have like a cool gallery shows, but have like a weird cave you could go to, or I don't know. I want
I
to do something.
love it, dude. I'm
Yeah.
right there with you, like we think about like these systems of even art itself, like
Hmm.
the commercial quality of like exchange and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And working with gallerists and doing exhibitions, this kind of like more traditional way of like buying and selling art and showing art and like building a career as an artist. But I think we do live in a very special time where like these systems are starting to show their fault lines,
Hmm.
and there could be real opportunities to change the paradigm of like how art functions for our society and for our culture outside of the commercial realm that really can get a little bit tricky in terms of like your own relationship to like buying and selling like art itself. The commercial side of it can feel a little bit isolating. It can feel a little bit dry. It can feel a little bit like almost like taking advantage of, like, because there's like, that not everybody can afford original painting. So you're also working with a certain layer of the social economic strata who's going to be buying and selling your work. And ultimately it's going to end up maybe just sitting in a warehouse somewhere or sitting in someone's back room somewhere, like, but to build a destination, a place where the art is always alive and always available for anybody who wants to come see it without any sort of like financial limitations. To me, that just sounds like a more like idealist way of like how art can kind of build our culture up again.
Yeah.
I think artists have always been a part of like building the mythology of a given culture and society. I mean, when you look through art history, that's really like the role art plays a lot of times.
Hmm.
And I think we live in a time that's kind of begging for a new mythology, begging
Yeah.
for a new story, a new sort of chapter in like the direction humanity should be going in. I think art can always be sort of like a torch that leads us.
Yeah.
Um, and I also like how you like mentioned Shinru Suzuki, I think Zen Mind's beginner's mind. Like, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? The beginner's mind. It's like the freshness of that, the openness of that is how we can create a sense of infinite possibilities. And so we
Hmm.
have to like reconfigure in some ways our relationship to our work and its relationship to the commercial scene of art and buying and selling. Like, how can we subvert this paradigm? And I
Yeah.
don't think it's an either or. I think everything's kind of a both and, you
Yeah.
know? But I think it's beautiful that you're having these like deep sort of contemplative experiences about like what it is you want to actually do with your work and how you want it to serve. Because at the end of the day, like we were saying earlier, it's all ephemeral. It all is going to fall apart. Nothing
Yeah.
lasts forever. But what I think maybe does last is sort of the energy exchange of consciousness, the giving and receiving that happens amongst humans to one another. And
Hmm.
the energy of that like seems to go beyond the material. Do you know what I mean? So
Totally.
it's like even if the painting turns to dust, the energy that was encoded in it and the way it was reflected back into the consciousness of a viewer somewhere that influenced them or inspired them in some deep way, that lasts forever. That
Yeah.
inspiration, that feeling, that connection, not the painting itself. The painting itself is just a catalyst for that kind of internal experience for another. And
Hmm.
so I'm always trying to think about like, how do you harness that to create like the biggest impact, so that it's not about like a one-to-one relationship, one painting, one owner, but it's like the artwork can have infinite amount of owners, so to speak.
And that's I feel like to me like that's what I want to like explore more with my life now. It's like, how can I make art do what I think art should really, really do? And
Mm-hmm.
there's not like a final answer to it, but I am very inspired by going to Passaquan and seeing, like Howard Finster's Garden of Paradise. It's just like, I, it shouldn't, it shouldn't involve like transactions. Like to me in my practice, so I have like my spiritual, like, archetypal figures, and I want people to see them, but I'm at a point now where I feel kind of uneasy about the idea of selling them. But I
Mm.
make other paintings like this one behind me. Like if someone were to buy it, I'd be like, cool,
Yeah.
do that. So like I have like work that I want people to like own and have, and I need to keep my life going somehow, But like there's other stuff I've made that like I want everyone to see it, but the idea of possessing it doesn't seem like the point.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I feel like the more artists can like start to create boundaries for themselves, the more we can develop a culture that's not
Yes.
just about business or capitalism. It's about
Exactly.
healing, or it's about seeing, or it's about just sharing. And
Yeah.
like, to me, that's what it's always been inspiring to me. It's never been like, oh, how much is that painting? Like that doesn't inspire me. Like
Yeah, exactly.
even
I don't
the
care.
money doesn't inspire me. Like it just makes me buy groceries, which I was doing.
Yeah, exactly.
So like, yeah, it's just I'm not excited about fame or fortune or like career opportunities. I'm excited about people and inspiration,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
art, like actual art. And
Yes, man.
the most popular art and the most popular music is the worst. So I'm just like, I don't really aspire to that, by the way. I don't want an award from your shitty company or your shitty
Yeah,
organization.
because they're so like formulaic at that level. You know what I mean?
And it serves
And
something evil.
yeah, I'm in 100% agree with you. I'm always like trying to like, because there are practical realities. Like, I have two young kids, I have a family. Like, I have to find ways to like sustain my life,
Yeah,
And it's like, how can we, and again, back to this idea of this like really tumultuous, interesting time period we're in. Like, I think there's, whenever there's a lot of chaos and destruction, there's opportunity for new growth and new paradigms to emerge. And it's like, how do we like contemplate new economic paradigms where it's not necessarily like you're saying transactional, but it's more of like a collective sustainability that
yeah,
is being fostered in some way through a sense of trading of energy and time, like essentially that's all it is. It's like we're trading energy and time with one another in such a way that we can all mutually benefit. It's not like a zero sum game like the economic systems that we've developed tend to try to like tell us, but it's really like everyone can win if we know how to cooperate in a proper way. And I just don't know what it's going to be, but I do have a feeling that like these ideas are starting to become more and more like palpable for larger and larger groups of people than they ever have been. And
yeah,
so I'm curious like how we could develop a new way of sustaining our lives as artists beyond just the one-to-one transaction of paintings and drawings and so forth. And I don't know the answer to that, but it's something I'm definitely, looking for and thinking about in my own life because sustainability is the only thing I really care about in terms of, the practicalities of like what my family needs. Like I got to be able to provide in some ways and I can't, I teach art. That's how I kind of help sustain my life. I love to share what I love, and so I love that side of it. It's the teaching side, but yeah, just I'm thinking about those same things, David. Like, how do we kind of create new systems of healing and of inspiration, of using art as a way of creating more community and collective connection? And so we'll see. We'll stay tuned, everybody. Maybe we'll figure it out.
yeah.
Maybe we'll
Ultimately, though,
figure.
what I like about making art objects or whatever is sometimes I like meet other people that do stuff like they fix houses, or they bakers or something, and I can trade like a painting for like a lifetime or like a year's supply of bread or something, or like
Yeah.
you'll like fix my door or something. And like,
Yes.
so like my dad always kind of did that. Like he's a graphic designer, and he's this kind of guy that like if some like donut company wanted him to do a logo, he'd be like, well, can our family just like eat donuts from there whenever you want? I'll just do this for free. And it's like, that's what we would do most of the time. So it's
That's
like,
awesome.
cut the money part out and just like,
Yes.
do this thing, you do that thing, and you know me. And like, when I'm around, treat me cool and we're all
Yeah,
good. So it's
I
like,
know.
I'm kind of interested in whenever I can to figure out how to cut out the middleman and try to
Mhm.
just like you said, just energy and time. Like I got
Yeah.
this energy, You need
Yep.
me to do this and you do this. So it's like, and what that does is cause relationship bonds.
Yes.
And so like we're living in a world now where I feel like social media and technology is making our relationships like, well, like you and I can talk to each other. That's cool. That's through
Yes,
technology. But
definitely.
in other ways, there's isolation happening, or people being like less humane or less in touch with each other. And so it's like if we can like connect like this through technology, maybe we can also connect with each other and try to like exchange energy or like do things for each other globally
Yeah.
without like having to be in the same neighborhood, and we can still figure out how to like maybe cut out the middleman of capitalism somehow,
Yeah. I
little by little,
know.
you know?
I don't know how we do it, but I think it's totally possible. And I think it just comes down to like people who are everyone becoming a visionary of some kind to like envision a new way of moving, a new way of being on this planet, a new way of interrelating with one another. And it begins, at home with ourselves, like just being
Yeah,
hyper conscious of like how we use our energy, how we use our time, how we connect with our neighbors, our community, our family, our friends, our strangers, what have you. And part of me, I mean, this is like the part of the big inspiration why I even started this whole project, this podcast, is to like try to foster a sense of connectivity and with other like-minded artists or artists who are thinking about these similar ideas, even though we all do it in our own ways, some more conscious than others. I'm very, there's a spectrum there. But like this is what gets me excited, is like to be able to like connect with someone like you and have these kinds of conversations and be able to plant these seeds in the backs of our minds that might sprout into something we could have never imagined in this moment. And I
yeah,
think that's kind of the role of the artist too, is like planting seeds of consciousness everywhere we go.
yeah,
Like pointing, like you were saying in the very beginning, like pointing beyond the veil of what's beyond just this, temporal existence in this body of ours. Like, like what our consciousness is, which is connected to the mysterious cosmos all around us.
mm-hmm.
And there is so much limitations in terms of our ability to understand fully what it is we're doing here, and tapping into these ancient traditions who have been exploring this for millennia, and they have their systems, their metaphors, their mythologies. These are all very helpful tools for us, but they're ultimately, I don't think, going to get us there. Like we have to ultimately integrate those ideas and then find our own unique expression of how to implement them into our lives to awaken our own consciousness, and let that sort of pour out through everything that we are and everything that we do. One aspect of your spiritual journey that I'm curious about, if it's ever had an impact on you, has plant medicine or psychedelics ever been a part of like an awakening process for you? Because I think that's another part of this contemporary paradigm that's shifting in an interesting way, in
Mm-hmm.
both good and bad, is sort of the mainstream sort of becoming more accepting of psychedelic therapy and sort of the research surrounding these compounds. For
Yeah.
you personally, has that been a part of your journey, or do you have any sort of thing to reflect upon that aspect?
Yeah. So when I was a teenager, I was in a hardcore straight edge band, and we're all about
Nice.
straight edge. And then when I moved out, I remember I went to like a music festival and everyone was doing drugs, and I didn't do any drugs. And then I came home and I was like, why didn't I do any drugs? And then I was like in the woods with my brother, so we just like smoked some weed, and then a cop comes up and starts to arrest us. And I'm like, well, I guess this is what happens when you do drugs.
Oh my
And then
gosh.
after that, he was like frisking us. He was about to throw us in the back of his car, and he's like, "Well, I'm actually after this like drunk driver that's around close. Do you know where he went?" I was like, "He actually went that way. I actually did see him." And so the cop actually went after the guy and was like, "Y'all are free to go." And so I was like scared shitless, and I was like, "I'm never gonna do drugs ever again after this." But ever since that day, I've been smoking pot every day. And I like took DMT when I was like 20, and it was like a really immersive, impactful situation. I went to Saturn and I saw these other beings, and we were working on architecture together.
Wow.
And I was looking at my hands; my hands were different, and I was like, when I spoke to them, it was this 3D kind of like Arabic-looking script that was also like you could touch it and you could look around it, and that's how we figured out how to build this building we were working on together. So it was a very like immersive,
Yeah.
weird, like I was like, oh my god, there are other realities, and like you
Yeah.
can talk to people in these other realities. So
Yes.
I've done DMT about 3 times, and I take mushrooms like every now and then. acid and mushrooms. So like I'm definitely into psychedelics. And now that I'm in my 30s, I haven't been tripping as much. Like I'll trip maybe once a year or something like that,
Yeah.
or more than
Yeah.
that. But like I used to trip a lot more when I was in my 20s, and now
Hmm.
that I'm in my 30s, like I still like to smoke weed, but I don't. I'm not so like, oh, I have to trip. Like,
Yeah.
like if I trip, that's fine, but like I don't really like. I don't need to do it.
Yeah, I feel you. I've been on the similar journey, definitely, cannabis is definitely an ally plant. I
Yeah,
definitely have to find my boundaries with it personally
definitely.
because there was a time in my life where I did a lot of it. And so it's definitely a healing plant for me, but I also, I have to find my own personal boundaries with it. And same with, DMT. I've done that a few times. And yeah, I mean, that's
It's amazing.
talk about immersive,
Yeah,
like you're like that's an experience that, for anyone out there that's never done it or doesn't know anything about it, I mean, it's definitely not something you want to take frivolously or lightly. It's incredibly powerful, incredibly potent, and oddly like incredibly safe from
yeah.
a
You feel good
physiological
afterwards.
perspective. It's like the most benign
Yeah.
thing you could put in your body because your body produces it. It knows exactly what to do with it. And then mushrooms and LSD, and those have been some of the most important sort of like touch points of like healing for me. I
Hmm.
look at them as like they've been revealing to me about like my potential to love, to connect, to appreciate, to feel fully and completely present in 100 million% of my being in the moment, and so like you come back from those and you say like, oh, like I have this potential to do that. How do we do it here without it? And so that's why my like exploration with meditation and breath work and yogic practices and prayer have been a way for me to integrate those experiences. So for me, I'm kind of similar with you. Like I'll do like a big trip maybe once a year, maybe
Hmm.
twice a year, and be very intentional about it and very respectful of it and really create a container of ceremony and ritual. That's how I approach it because I know you just don't want to like take these compounds for granted, and you also don't want to like, I don't know, you don't want to take them too seriously, but also not too lightly either. You got to
Yeah.
find this kind of balancing point within yourself to appreciate and respect the plant because they are, in my opinion, they're teachers and
Yeah.
they're allies for us to help awaken us. And it's for everybody and not for everybody at the same
Yeah.
moment. You know what I mean? It's kind of an odd phrasing, but it's hard to explain, especially to people who haven't had those portals kind of opened up in their consciousness yet. And I think it's going to be an interesting, 5 to 10 years as these things become more and more mainstream, as like the therapeutic sort of approach becomes more widely accepted and people are starting to engage in it who would have never ever gone near it.
Yeah.
It's going to open up. So I feel like there is an awakening in consciousness. Maybe people say that every generation all the time,
Yeah.
but I feel like there is something
More so.
percolating. There's something
Yeah.
percolating here. And I think,
Oh.
especially in the wake of all the atrocities and horrific wars and pain and suffering that we are so um, aware of because of social media, because of the connection we have to the news cycles and all of that, like we have to find a new way, a new answer. And I think psychedelics are going to be a part of that. They're not going to be the whole answer. Some people are like, preach from the psychedelic soapbox that it's the only answer, put it in the water supply, dot, dot, dot. I don't know if that's the answer either. I think the middle way. There's a middle way. And that's one thing I love about Buddhism. And one of the main teachings of the Buddha is the middle way, is finding this sort of balancing point. I think of like the yin and the yang symbol. And I think about the sine wave, the curve
Mm-hmm.
between the yin and the yang. Like that's what we need to ride on, is
Hmm.
that razor's edge of the middle way. And that's something I'm always trying to figure out how to like find in my life, is the middle way in each moment. And it's hard because life is so dynamic, something could fly in and throw you off your center any moment. And so the goal is how to develop a practice or a skillfulness. Upaya is sort of the term in Buddhist circles, like skillful means to get yourself back on the center spoke. But it's, yeah, it's interesting. The psychedelics are they're so hard to talk about with people who haven't had that experience. Like I have some really close friends of mine who I know are like ready for it and can totally handle it, but there's just something holding them back. And I don't want to be the one to push them. I don't ever think being forceful is my way of being, but I want to give them a nudge. I want to see if they can kind of dive into those spaces, because then I think him and I, especially I'm thinking of a couple of really close friends, we would have such a different layer of connection to speak
Mhm.
on. But maybe not. I don't know. So
Yeah. You never know.
yeah,
It is one of those things where it's like it's so personal that they have to choose it themselves for it to be like
exactly.
this safe space or to feel like it's their own
True.
personal development. Because to
Exactly.
me, like these like plant allies, they like if you don't have boundaries for yourself and you don't have some kind of spiritual foundation or backbone, you're just gonna be like thrown into a whirlwind of like,
Yeah.
who are these faces or
Yeah,
voices?
like what's going
Like,
on? Like there's no
yeah.
context,
And like that might be cool, but it also might make you go crazy or might make you
Yeah.
scared or might just make you not learn anything. Like,
Hmm.
and I do feel like bad trips and bad experiences still can teach you a lot. So
Definitely.
it still can be cool. But like I've met so many people that have great consciousness that have never touched any drugs, and it's like it's not
Exactly.
really about that. It's just about like how to expand your consciousness to somewhere that isn't already. And
Exactly.
so, like, if you can do that by hiking or by reading different poems or seeing paintings, then
Or
good.
gardening.
For gardening, yeah.
Yeah.
Like for me, like I can literally just like look at a snail shell or a string and have like a psychedelic like awakening of some kind. But sometimes I'm like so much part of society or reality or my ego that I'm like I want another force to like tear that away from me, just so I can see like what I've constructed and what I haven't constructed, or
Yeah.
like I'm interested in other forces like putting me in my place
Yeah.
sometimes.
Hmm.
If you're not interested in that, then maybe you shouldn't do this.
Yeah,
It's like,
exactly.
but I am, and I feel like also like because we're artists, we're like so like some of my favorite artists told me like they love like shaman artists and like medicine men from indigenous tribes, like the paintings that they would make for their tribes. They
Yes.
would go on medicine quests and then make paintings, and then the tribe would learn from those paintings. And
Yeah.
that's kind of like the role I see for like spiritual visionary artists, is like we're here to like help normal people like see these crazy things so that they can do what they need to do. But this
Yes.
is like this is our main quest, is just to go there and to record it.
Yes.
This will help you guys better with your corn and the way you treat your kids and the way you build houses. This will hopefully help you like think on another level about that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
for like us, we're just here to go in and that's it. Like, have you ever seen Stalker by Tarkovsky?
No, I haven't.
And so like, Stalker is like this character that goes into the zone, and it's like this weird realm. And I love that movie because to me, like embodies like what an artist is and what society is in the
Mm,
most like mental, symbolic,
wow. I'll
beautiful
have to
way.
check it out.
Really, really good, but really easy to fall asleep in because it's very atmospheric and slow. But like ultimately, like one of the best films ever too,
Man, it's called Stalker.
by Tarkovsky. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm definitely going to check that out. I mean, that sounds amazing. And I agree with you, man, about like the role of the artist. Like, and there are different layers and levels of making art. You know what I mean? We can look at the art world and we can see people making all kinds of work about all sorts of things. But I think what artists like you and myself are really interested in and what we're doing is about like kind of like being sort of the intrepid explorer of consciousness, going into these spaces and bringing back imagery, bringing back like the boons from them and giving them away through our creative process. It's like that hero's journey. It's like we're willing to go into the underworld. We're willing to go into these far, vast, mysterious realms of consciousness in order to bring the light back, in order to bring the messages back, the information back to share with others so that we can help the community of beings elevate their consciousness together. And it's not like a one-off thing. It's like a constant practice, a
Mm-hmm.
constant sort of exploration. It's really for me like when I talk about being an artist with other people, it's not a profession, it's not a career, it's a life path. It's a way of living. It's an approach to this life. And I feel so blessed and grateful every day that like even though I do have very hard days, it is not easy being an artist. It's not easy, putting yourself out there, being vulnerable, being willing to fail a lot. and be rejected a lot. You know what I mean? Like you have to have thick skin. You have to be willing to traverse this sort of very rugged terrain of the contemporary art landscape and find whatever path is right for you. But to me, like all that aside, it doesn't matter how hard or easy it is. It's a life path. It's just like a way of being in this world that I couldn't be in any other way, you know?
Yeah.
And so I really appreciate getting connected with another artist like yourself. I know you're in Nashville. I'm actually from Louisville, Kentucky, is
Nice.
where I was raised. I'm currently in New Orleans, and I don't know what's going to happen by the time this podcast releases, but there's a small chance I'm moving back to Louisville very
Wow.
soon. And so we'll be in a similar region, and I definitely want to be able to connect with you more, man. And
Yeah. Hang out if you're in Louisville.
say what?
We should hang out if you're in Kentucky because that's not
Yeah,
far at all.
not at all. Not at all. Exactly. Because I think building community is really important and building a shared vision for like what art can become as with this sort of world unfolds in front of us is really important as well. And so I think it's just an amazing experience just to be able to connect with you today on the podcast. I mean, I think we could keep going. I mean, I'm actually curious about a couple more things, and then
Yeah.
we'll try to wrap up. We've been going for about an hour.
Okay.
But I meant to ask this earlier, and I want to just circle back to it. But like through your explorations of like the Eastern traditions, like what are some of the practices or some of the components of those traditions that you kind of bring into your life now? Like, do you have like a formal meditation practice? Are you interested in like the tantric sort of practices of Tibetan Buddhism? Like, what is sort of like some of your like daily spiritual rituals? Do you have a spiritual kind of ritual of how you enter the studio and how you like hold your own creative space? I was just curious about that part of your practice before we wrap up.
Totally. So about like 2013, I got into like a sort of daily meditation practice where I would like sit in lotus and like read something and then meditate every morning. And so I've
Nice.
been doing that for I guess like 10 years now or whatever. And when I started doing that, I started realizing like my painting practice like has now like a natural source of inspiration. It's not like I'm not looking around for inspiration. I just meditate and
Yeah.
then just like things just come up.
Hmm.
And like usually my practice of meditation for me is like kind of like mental maintenance. I'm just
Hmm.
going through my thoughts and just like letting them come and go and just like seeing what's bothering me or what's going on, you know. And then at some point it'll get a lot more calm and quiet, and that's kind of like the nice part of the meditation or whatever.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, so like the more I started like getting into meditation, the more I realized though that like there's like so many pictures in my subconscious mind, and there's so many like just like gravitational pulls. And so my meditation practice would have like like a part where I go through banal stuff, just like lists of
Hmm.
like groceries and
Yep.
bills, things I
Exactly.
do, just dumb. And then after that, like maybe a figure would come, like a person in my life, or a song, or like something, or an art piece. And then after I let go of that, I'd start to think about like cosmic relationships, like being on the earth, or like the stars around, or like the sun. And then after a while, like there'd be like something after all these days of meditation that is in common with all the meditations. And usually that begins to start me on some kind of painting or some kind of image. Because like there's
Yeah.
something in the mental landscape that is more consistent than other things. And
Yes.
that's kind of like the preoccupation for me. So it's like if I don't have this like practice of mentally like decluttering, which I meditate 1 to 2 times every day basically.
Yeah.
And I take Sunday off. I want to observe Sabbath, but I'm not Orthodox. And
Hmm.
Saturday's when all the art shows happen.
I know.
So I take Sunday off every Sunday if I can.
Yeah.
So I meditate every day and I take Sunday off.
Cool.
And I usually try to meditate after lunch. I also cook my own meals most of the time. I don't like to eat other
Yeah.
food. I like to eat like some other food, but like so my mom is like French-Algerian from Paris, and I grew up just eating her food my whole life.
Oh, wow. That's
Really
awesome.
good. I was like, oh my god, I can't buy this food anywhere. Like one, there's no restaurants that make this kind of food where I live.
Yeah.
Two, I couldn't afford to if that did exist.
Yeah. Right.
I just like so cooking is a part of my practice too. Like I cook at least
Beautiful.
1 or 2 meals every single day, if not three.
Beautiful. Yeah.
So I meditate, I cook, and I have a garden in the spring and the summer.
Awesome.
And, I play guitar or I play piano. Like I have a piano and guitar. Um,
Beautiful.
I thought I was gonna be a musician when I was a kid because I live in Tennessee. You know, everyone plays music.
Yeah, yeah,
It's like it's my spiritual practice. Like I don't need anyone
yeah.
to know what songs I've written. I have like 400 songs in my iTunes that I've made. I
Wow,
just like
dude.
some of them I've released. I released a metal album this month
That's
under a
sick.
moniker called Hyromancer. It's like black metal.
Oh my God, you have to share that with me.
Yeah, it's like my bad vibes, but but it's like I have to get those out, or else I can't
Yes,
put the good vibes
yes.
out too. You know.
Mm-hmm.
So, so to me, actually, metal and black metal is very important to my spiritual health because it is my like my outlet for my darkness. Also,
Yeah.
I have a
Mm-hmm.
lot of darkness inside of me, like living in the South, and yeah, just like things going on in the Middle East, things going on in my neighborhood, things going on politically in America. Like, I need to make some crushy music about it, like something
Yes.
kind of hard about it. And
Yeah.
so music to me is very important. It's not like this consistent thing though that I know I'm gonna do. It just like it happens when it happens.
Yeah, that's beautiful, man. I love that. I mean, that's so important though, to be conscious of the shadows of ourselves.
Yeah,
Like that's like I think a lot about like Carl Jung, and like sort of the approach of the integration of the shadow self, and how important that is. But because a lot of approaches to spirituality sometimes can negate the shadow. It can be all about the light, all about one side, but like really it's about both. And how do we, it's like I was saying earlier, it's not either or, it's both and, like both things have to be acknowledged. So like finding ways in which to acknowledge the shadow, integrate it, and also let it dissipate too. Like, let it out, let it through. So I think that's beautiful that you like have a conscious approach to doing that, and music being sort of like the modality of how you like release that energy so that you can create space for new kinds of energy. I think
yeah,
we're always in this process of like creating space and then being filled and then emptying and filling and emptying and filling. And when I think about meditative process, I think that's for me what it's all about. Like what you're talking about is like letting go, emptying out, letting everything flow out so there can be an empty vessel, and so new things can flow in, and then eventually you got to let those out too, because if you just let it all kind of pack in, it gets so cluttered, and then that's where all the tension and the
yeah,
anxiousness comes from, because you don't have a release valve anywhere. You got to be able to release that
yeah,
out. And it's hard though, because it can be scary to see the shadow nature of your own consciousness, because a
yeah,
lot of times we want to negate it and pretend it's not there. And for me, like the shadow is sort of almost in some weird way, it is like the most important thing to help us connect to each other, so that we can not judge each other like
yeah,
we do. We judge each other so much. And thinking about like all the wars and all the tension across cultures, across time, like it all kind of comes down to this point of like a misjudgment, a misrepresentation of who we think the other is. And we identify them as some kind of enemy. But really, that's just a false narrative in our mind.
yeah.
So I think all that's so important, dude. Well, dude, we're in so much alignment. I love this. What a
It's
great
cool.
conversation we've had, man.
We're friends
It's
now.
it's beautiful, dude. It's really beautiful. And that's what I love about like being able to like hold this kind of space and have this kind of discussion. Because I think a lot of people out there listening are going to resonate with what we're talking about, and find a sense of connection. I get a lot of people who reach out to me about the podcast who are just so grateful because they feel like they can connect with, they see that there is a community of other artists and creatives who are interested in the same things, because some people might live in a certain part of the world or a certain part of the country where they don't really have like a community of like-minded artists who are thinking about these ideas that we're talking about. And so knowing that like you're out there doing this gives people who are also interested in this a sense of some kind of connection or some sort of community. And so I'm super grateful for you being willing to join me, man, and being able to dive deep. Yes, dude. And everybody out there, you have to check out David's work. In the show notes, there'll be links to the website, Instagram, and anything else you want me to add to the show notes, I'll add there. But thank you so much for your time today,
Yeah,
man. And I'm so grateful to connect with you. I know there's definitely more connection to come, man. So
definitely.
appreciate you.
Good to connect with you, Martin. And yeah, let's get back in touch anytime, man.
Awesome, dude. Well, enjoy the rest of your day. I'll talk to you soon. All right.
Thanks so much. Have a
All
good
right.
one.
You too. Peace.
Peace.
Thank you all so much for tuning into this episode of Concerning the Spiritual in Art. If you like what we're doing here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you can stay in touch and in tune with all the amazing offerings that we're going to be bringing to this channel. Thanks again for all your support. Super grateful, and excited to bring more content your way. Peace, y'all.